Well, it's such an honor to have each of you here, some of my favorite people on earth. I'm going to introduce each one of you, and then I'm going to read a little portion of my book. I think that we'll just have a good time just dialoguing about it.
Yeah.
The theme of tonight is breaking secrecy. And the reason that I wanted to do this theme of breaking secrecy is just like breaking physical bread aids our nourishment, the nourishment of our physical bodies. I think breaking secrecy amongst friends really nourishes our soul. And it's something that I believe is as spiritual and God ordained as taking communion with the physical bread. I think breaking secrecy and being in community, you know, God really reminds us so many times in His Word, and Jesus said it, it's all about love God, love people. And part of loving people is to get to know people. And part of really getting intimately connected with other fellow humans is really learning to break secrecy with them. And when I was going through my deepest season of sorrow, you were some of the people that I chose to break secrecy with. So, my dear friend, Angie Smith, my incredible friend, Paige Green, and then, of course, Lisa Harper, who's we've done ministry together
Please
for
don't make me cry anymore.
lots and lots and lots of years. And then Brandy Wilson, just a precious soul. And I love each of you so very much. And I can't tell you, I can't even express in words how much each of you have been just a profound part of my journey. And I'm not sure I would have had the courage to even continue in ministry without you. And I certainly wouldn't have had the courage to write It's Not Supposed to Be This Way without each of you just breathing life into me. You know, you had such a choice when I came to you and broke secrecy and said, this is what I'm going through. It's the hardest season of my life. And I shared intimate details of what I was facing, and each of you just looked at me with eyes of compassion and extreme love and just said, we're here for you. Like, no matter what, we're here for you. I stayed in your homes. I wept buckets of tears on your shoulder. You held me. You prayed for me. You said you understood. You broke secrecy with me and told me, like, Paige, I'll never forget. Like, I'm weeping on top of Paige, like literally laying on her weeping. And she's like, girl, let me just tell you some bad stuff about me. Like, it'll just...
It's okay. I got it too.
And it was just a moment with each of you. I mean, each of you just did that for me last summer, and I'll never forget it. And so part of my healing journey was for my birthday last year, which was right after I came to see you. My mom came to visit, and she said, when you were little, I just remember, Lisa, you loved to paint. Now, I think I have 5 sisters, so I'm pretty sure she confused me with one of my other siblings. Because I'm like, I never painted. Remember I wrote poetry. Like, I gave you a poetry book one year, like, you know, that I wrote in calligraphy and did the, on the parchment paper and the whole thing. So, Mom, I was the writer, not the painter. And my mom's like, no, when you were little, you painted, and you were just so happy when you painted. So, for your birthday, we're going to go paint. And I was like, no. So my mom is also the one who, one time I wrote a poem and I gave it to her, and she became so convinced I was supposed to be a country and western musical writer. Like, I was supposed to write songs, and not only was I supposed to write songs, but one of them that I gave her, a poem that I gave her, she thought it was so good, she was convinced I was supposed to call Willie Nelson and tell him he needed to use it as the lyrics of his next song. Oh, and wait for it, that I should also offer to sing it with him, because I feel certain Willie Nelson needed me in his career. So that was my mom. So she was convinced I needed to paint. So we went to the craft store and we bought a bunch of paints, and because my mom, you can't really tell her no. Like, she's going to boss somebody around, especially me. And so we went and we bought a bunch of paints, and then we sat down and I painted my first painting. And I remember struggling so much to make peace with the imperfections of my painting. And the reason I struggled so much to make peace with the imperfections of my painting is because, quite honestly, I struggled so much with making peace with the imperfections in me. And breaking secrecy with each of you helped me so much to make peace with the fact that I have imperfections too, and that those imperfections weren't the worst thing about me. They were actually the thing that made me quite delightful. And so I remember after I did my first painting, I didn't want to show it to anyone. I didn't want to do anything with my painting, but I remembered just the love and the compassion that you guys shared with me, and it gave me the courage to text you a picture of my painting. And that was really important for me to do, because not only was it part of making peace with the imperfections of my painting, it was part of a process of making peace with the imperfections of my story. And so I want to read you a little part of the book, and then I want to hear from each of you guys. So, a few weeks into my painting adventure, my house was filled with canvases, and I decided it was time to go to an art show to look at other people's work. Now that I dared to be a painter, I felt I could break secrecy with another painter. I knew her terror, her angst, her disappointment, her wondering if she was good enough. She didn't need to worry about keeping all that a secret, because I wouldn't require her paintings to live up to any unrealistic expectations. I would bring compassion. I knew how to stand before each painting with nothing but love, amazement, and delight. I refused to demand anything more from the artist. I just wanted to show up for every single piece she was so brave to put on display. I fought against any negative thought as if I were fighting away a hound of hell from taking even the slightest bit of ground. Might I just be courageous enough to stand before her work and require myself to find everything about it that I loved, release my clenched fist and pouty disappointments, and trade my live-up mentality for a show-up one. It's so much more freeing to simply show up and be a finder of the good. Break from the secret disappointments. Let my brain venture down the tiny little opening of love, a slight sliver of light sweetness in this world wrought with dark judgments, disgruntled comments, jagged-edged opinions, and lofty huffs of disgust. As I looked in her paintings, painting after painting at that art show, I showed up, and finally I realized what makes painting so delightful. It's their imperfections. We already know a painting isn't going to look like a photograph, and that's what makes it art. It's been touched by a human. It's been created by someone whose hands sweat and who can't possibly transfer divine perfection from what her cornea sees to what her fingertips create. Even the best painters will get something off scale, out of alignment, a shade too dark or a hair too thick. It will be flawed, and that's where we must make a crucial decision. What will we do with our disappointment? Will we see it as an unraveling of the precision we long for, a mockery of perfection and unbecoming, another disappointment to add to all the other disappointments we constantly feel? Or will we see the human behind the ink, the heart that dared to hold the paintbrush dripping with color? Remember that she was the courageous one, that she was the one who showed up, took the risk, braved the disappointments of others, and lived and made her mark. I love her for doing that, and therefore I can love her work. We dare to have affection for a painting not because of our tolerance of it, but because of our delight in the way it carries its imperfections. It's personally unique. It eloquently expresses something our souls understand in the unseen connection we make when we stand before it. There's a burst of courage that will explode off the canvas if we don't shrink back afraid. The moment the painter laid down her brush and stepped back pleased is when she allowed that painting to steal a few beats of her very own heart for you, the viewer. Close your eyes and receive this very human gift without any demand for more or better, and just show up and live. The way we stand before a painting is the direct reflection of the way we will stand before people. Regardless of who they are and how they are, there is only one way to stand before paintings and people, with compassion. That doesn't mean you agree with everything they say or everything they do, but it does mean you value each of them as a person who needs compassion. I like that word, compassion. It's being very well aware that all of us fear the imperfections deeply carved into our naked selves. We all cover up. And then we all get stripped bare when the winds become losses. Who do you want standing near you in those moments, dripping with disappointment and saturated with sorrow? I can assure you, it is not people who don't know the whole story, draped in gold-plated pride with mouths eager to spill out commentary like, here's what you did wrong. I would have never allowed myself to get in that position. If only you would have, ... Nope. It's those people with garments of understanding. They have personally experienced that this life between two gardens can sometimes make it excruciatingly painful to simply be human. They keep in mind the Bible's instructions as we rub shoulders human to human. Therefore, as God's chosen people, holy and dearly loved, clothe yourself with compassion, kindness, humility, gentleness, and patience. We are to put on these things every day, like a painter puts color on all he knows will connect his creation with others. So, you guys did that for me. That's exactly what you did. You allowed me to stand before you and not physically naked, but completely emotionally naked. And you gave me the gift of being able to stand there unashamed, just loving me for who I am and recognizing that, it's our imperfections that make us human and delightful, and it's in those places that we connect with one another most deeply. And you guys were so willing to break secrecy with me and just say, you know what, I've got raw, vulnerable, hurting places too. And it's in those places, not our places of perfection, but it's in those places where we hurt, where we feel the imperfections carved so deeply in our naked selves. That's where we can really connect, and that's where the strength of God's community, the bonds that are formed right there in those broken places, become the strongest bonds I believe that there are. So thank you guys for doing what you've done. And I guess I have a couple of questions for you. So one is, how have you experienced just the ability to break secrecy? How do you know when it's safe to break secrecy with someone else? And then what are those times where you feel like I've got friends that are around me, but how do I identify that person that's really safe enough to break secrecy? So, Paige, we'll start with you.
Oh gosh. I've broken secrecy a few times. I broke it with you that night because it's a sharing of burdens, and I think you have to go. The Bible says to share one another's burdens. And so, I think you had a big burden. You had a big burden that night, and I don't think some of that is like, I'm not sure. I think some of, as far as how to know who you can share it with, because I've been accused of being an oversharer, but there's moments I think when it's a provision of God, of a person of presence, that ministry of presence, and also to say, I don't know, some of it's timing, some of it's in you, and I was invited into that setting too. I think out of trust. I think your spiritual gut. I've heard this I get to be around lots of great Bible teachers. I'm blessed to do that. And so I've heard so much to follow your spiritual gut. The Holy Spirit there's a compunction there that He will give you, that this feels safe, that it's also an opportunity He gives. And that night was very, very sacred for me too, because it was, you took that burden, that very heavy burden, and you just set some of it over on me. And I got to just sit there with you and listen to a song and cry with you and pray over you, and super intimate, something I always will hold dear because it is such a sacred thing. And I think the Lord entrusts that to people. And I know we all feel very privileged to have been able to have been entrusted that with you. And so I think He knows. And you also are very smart and intuitive. Even when you're that heart-wrenched, that the Spirit, you know where to go with that. It's like He takes you out to that spacious place where you're safe.
And sometimes I think we overcomplicate, listening to the Holy Spirit. I really think that the Holy Spirit is just a very gentle but profound or I think I heard my friend Angela Thomas say that one time, and it stuck with me, and I really thought about it a lot. You know, I don't think that it's so complicated. I think the Holy Spirit really reveals, like, this is a safe person, or don't share that, not now.
There's
and we've got to listen to that and not brush it off of saying, oh, that's just, you know, my own brain, my own fear, whatever. I think that when we know Jesus, we are given that gift, and I think it is just that simple. But also, you made me feel safe because you were willing to share your own brokenness with me. And I think that there is that combination of, you know that this person has been broken, so therefore they're not going to come at you with a perfect perspective of life that's been untouched by deep woundedness. But also the Holy Spirit reining you in. Share this, don't share that, and really listening. Yeah.
I also think, Lisa, as you're, because you have walked with the Lord for a long time, so you're a pretty mature Christ follower, I think what you did for us is you handed us your trust. And I mean, most of us have walked with you for a long time, but I think as women who are a little more mature, for me that means my hair is chemically dependent.
Mine's not.
Yeah, I had my Spanx are cutting off my circulation at this exact moment. But I think for those of us who know God holds our heart, there are times I choose to say, I'm going to trust that you will be trustworthy, even though I don't have that life experience with them necessarily. And then I think there's a lot of times, I remember when I was in my 30s, the first time somebody held me, an infant, I mean right out of the womb, infant, wasn't married, didn't have kids, and I was just like, because you know, there's this fear I would like break it, and I knew there was a soft spot on the head, but it was a dear friend of mine who'd just given birth to this baby, and she said, Lisa, hold my baby. And the trust, when she looked at me and handed me that baby, I became a safe place. And so I think for some of us who've walked with the Lord for a while, to trust He's got this. I think we think bigger of the people He does allow us to rub shoulders with, and we say, until you break my trust, I'm going to choose, unless the Spirit says no, I'm going to choose to trust that you can keep this secret and you can empathize and or pray with me and for me. And I think that was a gift you gave all of us.
Well, thank you. Well, and another thing is I knew you guys were praying for me. And one thing, as people are trying to discern who is a safe person to break secrecy with, whether it's just a disappointment that we're wrestling through or it's a complete life devastation. And we all have the gamut of those. And pain is pain. So no matter what your pain is, it really does help to process with a godly friend. But one thing, I knew you guys were praying for me. And one rule that I often like to share with people, or not even a rule, it's kind of like a guideline, is when you know someone has prayed more words for you than they've spoken to you or about you, chances are that would be a safe person. Brandy, what do you have to say? Because I know you've walked through your own hard season, and your disappointments were very similar to mine. And that was one thing that made me feel so safe to reach out to you, because I didn't even have to tell you. I just said, here are the basics, and you're like, girl, I get it.
I know your pain. Unfortunately, know your pain. I feel like breaking secrecy is something I've had to learn because I'm a very loyal person to the core. And for me, a lot of breaking secrecy was around, the demise of my marriage of 20 years, my husband choosing to leave. And I was always so loyal and protective that sharing the secrecy of what was going on behind the scenes felt like I was betraying, that trust with him. So for me, being able to break secrecy really took those people that I trusted and I had done life with, and I looked in the eyes and I saw that they felt the pain that I was feeling, to be able to say, this is what has gone on. So that gift of being able to go first and say, I know what you've been through, I'm here for you, let's go and walk through this together, is so huge for me. And that support system that you have around you in times like that, they're what change you and get you through. God carried me through, 3 years of total devastation. And when you're reading the book, making her mark. I feel like that's what I'm doing at this
Yeah.
point in my life. Like,
Yeah.
I made a mark before, but the mark I'm going to make from here on out,
Yeah.
man, that's
Yeah.
what God brought me here for.
Yeah.
What's going to happen in the future and the hope He's given me because of my ability to break secrecy and get vulnerable with people and share the raw and the ugly and the messy.
Yeah.
Man, He's going to allow me
Yeah.
to really make my mark in ways that I would have never, ever dreamed.
And Brandy, how did you discern the layers of breaking secrecy? Because I do feel like there's layers to it.
You're
You know,
exactly
there are
right.
certain things like, okay, a small group of friends needs
Totally.
to know this. Like, you don't share everything with everybody
No.
because
Right.
not everybody is safe enough to do that. And that's where you can really, you know, get into trouble with people like taking your story and using it in inappropriate ways. They're not
Right.
just praying about it, but it's really becomes a gossip session. So
Totally.
there's layers. There's like a
Right.
small intimate
Right.
group, and then there's another group. But also with us having kids involved, you know, we have to be really careful because we want to draw those lines of being respectful to the person that hurt us, but at the same time recognizing we have a story as well. And so how did you sort of discern who was in what layer of?
Well, that's kind of been a struggle. Not necessarily deciding who was in that layer, but deciding how largely to share. And I asked you about it last summer, sitting by my fire pit with Angie, making that decision. And I think for me, in ways I felt like secrecy wasn't all the way broken because not all of the lies behind the scenes became public.
Yes.
And a lot of people put that on my shoulders. People from the outside watching, like, when is she going to speak up? When is she going to, you know, put something out there? When is she going to talk to some magazine or whatever? But for me, the priority was the protection of my children. I have three sons. They're 17, 14, and 12. And protecting them took priority over everything. And for me, protecting them meant that they did not see their mother function out of bitterness and anger and frustration, but it meant they got to see a strong woman who was taking care of herself first and taking care of them and chasing after God's heart. In the midst of breaking secrecy, I had this fear of my kids aren't going to grow up seeing a healthy marriage. My kids might, because we were in church world, my kids might, you know, not have a relationship with God, or they might feel bitter toward the church. So I thought, how can I show them that I am breaking secrecy and living my own truth? Because those 6 eyes are the most important 6 eyes watching this whole story unfold. And for me, it was continue to chase God and continue to chase the church, which was hard. I left the local church and I had to leave the church that I'd been a part of for 14 years. But I knew for me, breaking secrecy was not about going public and shouting it from the rooftops. It was more being able to share it in these intimate settings. It was seeking people who had done it and saying, Lysa, tell me why you made that decision and what can you tell me in my own life? And you had such wisdom to be able to discern, this is what worked for me. You need to think about the age of your kids, all of that kind of stuff. Because the pressure from the outside to break secrecy publicly is huge. And I did not expect that. I did not expect almost a backlash. People cared more about the story than they did the souls of my kids.
That's so good.
So good.
It's almost that People magazine salacious, you know, it's like, I want to know the gory details. To me, those are not the safe people. If anytime, my little girl's only 9, but I tell her, as soon as I brought her home from Haiti, I said, honey, here's the deal in our home. We'll do trauma. So if your heart hurts or your body is hurt, we'll deal with that. We don't do drama. And so I think in a nutshell, you had some people who wanted to stir up drama, but you go, no. We'll deal with the heartbreak. We'll deal with my kids, but we're not doing drama.
Yeah, that's so good. Well, and Angie, I know that when I came and stayed at your house and literally you just climbed up in bed with me and you held me, and it wasn't because you had gone through what I'd gone through. However, you had experienced deep heartbreak before, and you just knew the right things to say. You did. And it's not because your experience was the same, but the emotions underneath the experience, the devastation, the shock, the loss. Even though our stories are completely different, you tapped into your own raw emotion, and you gave me such a gift in just holding me. And it was precious and beautiful. So I don't know how you knew to do that, but you just did.
Something I keep thinking while you're talking about your paintings is that
My dad is a painter. He's an amazing painter. He's an amazing writer. He's an amazing everything. But I remember going into his office a few years ago, and he had this blank canvas set, and he had all of his oil paints laid out and all of his paint brushes, everything completely clean, completely in order. And we went through a few years of me walking in and saying, Dad, you've gotten another book on how to do this. You've gotten another book. You have a library full of books and you will not pick up a paintbrush.
Wow.
And I think there's something to be said about the people who, in their minds, are storing up these things, and the people who are like, I'm just going to take a chance.
Yeah.
I'm just going to do this, and it's going to be a mess.
Yeah.
And that was, I finally said to him, why aren't you painting? He said, I don't know how yet. Like, I don't know how you know until you do it.
Right.
Right.
That's
And
good,
so
yeah.
I think something I struggle with is I stack books. You know, like I want to know, before I do it, I want to know how to do it perfectly.
Right.
And the thing is, you can't until
Right.
you do. And,
Right.
and so I think the breaking secrecy is saying, I'm going to screw up. I'm going to screw this all up.
Right.
Right?
Right.
Like, I'm going to keep screwing it up. There's
Right.
never going to be a point where I email you this picture after this thing that I've gone through, and I say to you, look what I did. Isn't it perfect?
Yeah.
And that's, to me, that's the point, is
Yeah.
I am drawn to people who are picking up the brush, you know?
Yeah.
And I saw you do that for a long
Yeah.
time and not be intimidated by what might show up on the canvas. And I think just by showing us that, you're letting us into a place that says we're safe, and as a result, we treasure that gift, and we we keep it safe. And now I'm going to tell all of your secrets on camera.
Perfect. Well, and Angie, you also make a cameo appearance in the book.
Do I know?
Yes, you do.
Is this about my modeling days, yes or no? Why are you laughing?
I would love to say yes, but no. No. So we had that really, it was also about a painting. And you contacted.
talk about that.
Yeah, we're going to go there. I have a beautiful, amazing friend who paints. She's actually here in Nashville, and her name is Deanne, and she paints these glorious, amazing paintings. And so I commissioned her to do some angel paintings for Proverbs 31 Ministries. And Angie was scrolling through, I guess it was Instagram one day or something, and you saw a picture of a painting, and it arrested you. Why?
Yes. Well, the painting was of this angel, and she had kind of like reddish hair. And one of my daughters died when she was a baby, and part of the issue was her heart. And so whenever we told the story, there was a mark on her heart, you know, with my kids. And we had a toy bunny when we tried to explain to them. We put Band-Aids on the heart. You know, it was just, that was part of her story.
And she was your fourth child.
She would have been my fourth.
Audrey, yes.
Audrey. And so I saw it, and it literally was like a jolt, because I saw the painting, and I saw the red hair, and I saw it. She would say, I don't think that she intended to, which is part of what made it so amazing. But there was what looked like a cross on the angel's heart, which was enough to get me, like, gripped by it. The book that I wrote about Audrey is called I Will Carry You, and the title of her painting was Carry You. And so obviously she had no idea. It had nothing to do with my story.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
And so Angie saw this painting, was deeply moved by the painting, contacted me and just said, wow, this painting just is amazing. The original had sold, and so it wasn't going to be possible for Angie to get the painting, but just seeing it encouraged her.
Yeah.
Well, I thought, oh no.
Yeah.
She is going to get that painting. So I may or may not have conspired with Todd, her husband.
I was going to say, and apparently he had the same thought. Because,
And we got the artist to do a painting for Angie of Audrey, and I wrote Angie a note on the back of the canvas, and after Deanne finished the painting, and I just said, you know, sometimes God allows us a peek into eternity, and I just want you to know that you'll never have a picture of Audrey at 9 years old. But this painting, God downloaded the picture of Audrey in heaven to Deanne, and painted it so that even though it's not a picture, but it is a picture of Audrey. And she's whole and she's happy and she's beautiful, and you have a portrait of your beautiful girl, grown and happy and just thriving. And so we gave it to Angie. And so
I think you actually said something like, he can use a lot of things, and this time he used her brush.
Yeah.
You know, he used that.
He used Dan's paintbrush to give that to you. So,
Wow.
woo.
Warn me about this. This is all about my modeling. Now I feel totally
So, do you guys have, as we wrap up tonight, do you have any advice to someone who's going through a really hard time? Certainly, they can pick up the book. It's not supposed to be this way. And my prayer has been that they will not feel so alone. It's really hard when you're when you're pressing through everyday life, but you're dealing with something, and maybe it is that they've discovered their husband's having an affair, and that's just devastating on so many levels and shocking, or maybe it's like you, Angie, they have witnessed a child dying before their time, and it's just so confusing, or maybe it's even like any one of our stories, of loss, of disappointments big and small, and every day, and then epic, and then it's just difficult. Life can just really knock us down sometimes. And what if they're sitting here watching us saying, that's great, Lysa, that you have these amazing friends that you can trust. I don't know of anyone in my world that I'm safe enough to break secrecy with. So what do I do? What would you guys say to her? Like, what advice would you give her? Like, what to do, where to go?
I'll give you something really simple that somebody gave me years ago when I wasn't brave enough to show my scars like you were initially, or break secrets. And I followed their advice, and I leaned into warm laundry. And I got laundry out of my dryer, put it on bed, leaned into it, and prayed, Jesus, give me the grace to lean into your embrace. And I think if you start with his presence, he'll make you brave enough to find the right people to share secrets with. But I think it begins with trusting Jesus with our secrets.
That's beautiful.
Yeah,
That's beautiful. And, one thing that the Lord showed me several years ago, and I think his timing is so gracious. Several years ago, I would say maybe even 10, 15 years ago, the Lord really started challenging me that when I step into a setting with a whole bunch of women, it used to be that I stepped into that setting and I would think, I really hope someone invites me in.
Yeah.
But the Lord started showing me, Lysa, don't step into a setting saying, I hope someone invites me in. Step into a saying and say, Lord, show me who needs to be loved. Show me who needs to be served. And you start serving them. And I'm so thankful the Lord gave me that advice 10, 15 years ago. Because 10 or 15 years ago, had I gone through this, I wouldn't have had you guys as friends. But the Lord gave me that instruction, I think, as such sweet preparation for what he saw coming down the road for me. And one of the best ways that I've discovered to really find an intimate friend is to find women who I can invite in and who I can serve. And so I don't know what woman might be in your sphere of influence that you could invite in that way. But, just start doing that, and the Lord will be faithful.
I don't think if you're home and alone and you don't have a church and you don't have a friend, who can I tell this to? Whether it's something that's happened to you or something you've done. Like someone goes, I have this huge secret. I just need to, I need to share that burden with somewhere safe. I think you first of all ask God to help you. Just ask for just a simple prayer, just to help me. Please provide a safe place for me to share this. And then, pray towards a church. If you don't have a church or a place of support, finding support, and ask God to lead you to a safe place to share it. Because there is that burden bearing. It's so important. I was able to be a part of it. I'm getting a counseling degree, and one thing that was so important, we have where I'm doing my internship, there's these animals. And so we had a girl that she was dealing with some hard things, and the other therapist that was training me said, we're going to let her go away for 5 minutes and just tell the horse. She's just going to go tell the horse. And the child went off by herself. We gave her space, and she just went and and it was safe.
Wow.
She told the horse, and again, it just So I mean, but she practiced it, and so the next step is selling someone safer who can help her.
Yeah.
And so I think
Yeah.
you just ask the Lord for opportunity, because He's for
Yeah.
He's
Right.
for and the beauty of what you just shared. That without the sharing of the secrets, you miss that beauty of the
Yeah.
redemption.
That's right.
Yeah.
That the Lord wants to
That's
do
right.
when a secret is broken,
Yeah.
and it's able to be shared, and the beautiful redemption
Yeah.
that happens out of that.
That's
And
right.
I think for women to recognize secrets do not keep us safe. They make us sick.
Right.
That's what's going to be so powerful about this book, Lisa, is for people to realize I've been hanging on to something, actually to my own demise.
Yeah.
It's made me sick. So I think, like Angie said, be willing to make a mess. Just start. Pick up the
Yeah.
brush.
And I think part of it too is, sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, you probably had a better thought.
Now they're going to know.
Because she had a modeling career too.
I think part of me trusting myself enough to break secrecy was learning to love myself, because I loved everyone around me really well.
good.
I loved my kids really well. I loved my husband really well. I loved my friends really well. I knew if I was going to Sonic, what drink everybody would want. I didn't love myself well. So part of
so
me
good,
trusting myself enough to be
Yeah.
willing to break secrecy
really good.
was self-care. And
Yeah.
it started
Yeah.
like super small, with lighting the candles that had been sitting on my coffee table for probably 18
So
months.
good.
Like burn the candle that had been sitting there. Buy the flowers at Trader Joe's.
Yes.
Take the yoga class and spend 90 minutes on a mat where you're working so hard you can't think about
Yeah.
all the crazy stuff going on in your life. You're just focused on yourself for a few minutes. So for me, I had to learn to love myself and self-care. Great therapist. Sometimes we have to pay people and break our secrets with
absolutely.
a therapist, which is great. But for me, I had to trust myself enough by loving myself enough to be willing to break secrets with those people.
Yeah.
And I will tell you, as people are breaking secrets to you, I had this one friend, she's about 10 years older than me. She's amazing. And every time, she always met with me over a meal. And when I got to the table, she had either mashed potatoes or grits or chicken and like she had some kind of hearty food, because I would lose a lot of weight. I know. She knew I was not taking great care. Mac and cheese, fried
Yes,
chicken.
praise God.
But I was like, she's a genius to invite me in and provide comfort food.
That's
like
good.
that's a 1-2 punch right
It
there.
is.
So,
Sure is.
yeah.
Would you mind
Very
texting
good.
me her number?
Yes, I'll
Yes,
share
we
it.
all need her digits.
Well, and I love that you said learning to have really compassion for yourself,
totally. Yeah.
because that self-compassion is something I had to learn too.
You're
And
right.
we'll never have appropriate, deep, authentic compassion for others if we don't first
That's right.
have it for
Yes.
ourselves.
That's right.
So Angie, what were you going to say?
It was more about a cover shoot that I had in Milan.
I've heard the stories about that.
No, what I was going to say is, and I think sometimes we have to learn this from other people, is, we've all shared, like, I'll go to my grave with stuff here.
Yeah.
It has made you all more beautiful to me.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes when we're sharing, we're like, oh, they're going to, but wait, I don't feel that way. When you do, I'm like, oh, you're braver than I thought.
That's right.
You are,
Yes.
this
That's right.
makes me
Yes, it's the opposite.
love, and it is, but then for us, we were like,
Yeah.
oh, she'll, and so I guess it's just a reminder of almost sort of what you said though, but like loving yourself enough to know that the people who are trustworthy are not going to love you less because of it. I think that's, for me at least, in Milan, that was one of my struggles.
Well, messy, vulnerable. Yeah.
And your hair totally,
Her hair is so
totally
great.
looks like a model.
They're so great. But
Let's just clearly state that.
I
So-
think messy, vulnerable is so beautiful.
It is.
It's so
It is.
beautiful. An older friend of mine said, people are not interested in where you got it right. They're interested in where you got it wrong, and Jesus redeemed it.
Yeah.
So it's the scars, to me, that become beauty marks.
Thank
It's
you.
really good.
Well, Lisa, I think that's a good note to wrap up
Yes.
with. So thank you guys. Angie,
Love you.
Paige, Lisa, Brandy, I love you guys.
I love you
And
too.
I will forever be grateful that you walked me through this season and have continued to cheer me on. So love you guys.
Love you.
Love you too.
Love you.